Hello everyone, my name is Fabienne Eke, and for the subject S.P.U, I've done research on the question, is active euthanasia morally better than passive euthanasia? Concerning this question, there are more than just the two basic answers, yes or no. Therefore, I chose two of them. The first perspective is, there is no real difference between the two. The second one is, no, active euthanasia isn't morally better than passive euthanasia. But before evaluating this question and its possible answers any further, I will first explain the difference between active and passive euthanasia. Active euthanasia occurs when medical professionals deliberately do something that causes the patient to die. Passive euthanasia occurs when the patient dies because the medical professional either didn't do something necessary to keep the patient alive, or when they stopped doing something that was keeping the patient alive. For example, switching off life support machines, disconnecting a feeding tube, not carrying out life-extending surgery, not giving life-extending drugs. Simply said, it's the difference between killing and letting die. It's important to take into account that both situations are always medical and that I'm talking about the moral difference. The main argument of the first perspective, there is no difference, is stated in an article from the BBC Ethics Guide. The argument is, some people believe that the distinction of killing and letting die is nonsense, since stopping treatment is a deliberate act, and so is deciding not to carry out a particular treatment. The BBC employee claims that switching off a respirator requires someone to carry out the action of throwing the switch. If the patient dies as a result of the doctor switching off the respirator, then although it's certainly true that the patient dies from lung cancer, for example, it's also true that the immediate cause of their death is the switching off of the breathing machine. To conclude, he says there's no real difference between passive and active euthanasia, since both have the same result, the death of the patient on humanitarian grounds. The second perspective is no. Passive euthanasia is morally better. The main argument for this answer, coming from an article on the site Pregnant Pause, a site which contains information on abortion, euthanasia, infanticide, and other related topics. The argument is, in passive euthanasia, doctors are not actively killing anyone. They are simply not saving the patient. The author of the used source claims, I quote, "While we would usually applaud someone who saves another person's life, we do not normally condemn someone for failing to do so. If you rush into a burning building and carry someone out to safety, you will probably be called a hero. But if you see a burning building and people screaming for help, and you stand on the sidelines, whether out of fear of your own safety or the belief that an inexperienced and ill-equipped person like yourself would only get in the way of the professional firefighters, if you would do nothing, few would judge you for your inaction." His second argument is, proponents of euthanasia say that while we can debate whether active euthanasia should be illegal, there can be no debate about passive euthanasia. You cannot prosecute someone for failing to save a life. Even if you think it would be good for people to do X, you cannot make it illegal for people not to do X, or everyone in the country who did not do X today would have to be arrested. The argument from the BBC contains logical reasoning, strong evidence, and facts. Therefore, it is a strong argument. The author states a clear and valid conclusion. The source, the BBC, has a reputation to uphold, for it is a highly respected news channel. Even small mistakes can be fatal, and so you would say that the BBC is a reliable source and the argument is credible. While the first argument of the no perspective sounds logical, we must take into account that the example given isn't a medical situation and therefore isn't valid. Doctors must take an oath at the beginning of their career that they would do anything in their power to save his or her patient. This makes the argument only credible when talking about voluntarily passive euthanasia. Yet, in that situation, voluntarily active euthanasia might even be better, especially when the patient is in great pain. Active euthanasia is quicker and less painful, and therefore in most situations morally better than passive euthanasia. The second argument is in my opinion weak as well. The first reason for my claim is because the author says, or everyone in the country who did not do X a day would have to be arrested. Not everyone in the country is a doctor. Again, he fails to stay in a medical situation, making the argument invalid. My second reason is that failing to save a life is something else than passive euthanasia. The author mixed up situations and definitions. This all makes the argument not credible. The source itself is rather old. Most articles are dated around 2000, making the source unreliable to some extent. There are no references, no author names, and no background. This makes the source absolutely uncredible. In conclusion, the no perspective has no leg to stand on. It has no valid arguments and a rather unreliable source. The other perspective, on the contrary, has a strong argument which I agree with, coming from a reliable source. Therefore, in my opinion, there is no moral difference, because in both cases you deliberately do something, or nothing, that causes the patient to die. Intentionally is still intentionally, no matter what.